The scream of the wind rattled the old windows, and for a split second, I thought it wasn't the storm outside but someone crying for help. My pulse quickened. The laughter from the living room masked the sound, champagne glasses clinking in careless cheer, but something in me twisted with unease. I turned my head toward the frosted panes, squinting as though I could see through the snow and darkness. A chill swept through me, one that had nothing to do with the draft sneaking under the doors. Yet when I looked back at the room, at the glowing hearth, at the silver platters of roasted turkey and sugared ham, at my cousins sprawled across velvet chairs, drunk with merriment, the suspicion felt absurd. Inside, the world was golden and safe, brimming with warmth and excess. Outside, the storm howled, cruel and merciless, but even as I tried to dismiss it, my eyes flicked instinctively toward the armchair in the corner. The one with the knitted red blanket slung over the back, empty. Always Grandma's place, always the heart of Christmas. The sight of it, stark and abandoned, unsettled me more than I cared to admit. My mother raised her glass, her voice swelling above the carols that danced from the stereo. "To family," she declared, her cheeks flushed with champagne and satisfaction. The room erupted in cheers, glasses clashing in midair like victorious swords. My uncle bellowed with laughter, spilling a little golden liquid onto the carpet. And no one cared. My cousins whooped, my aunt giggled, and the fire roared louder as if to join in the toast. The portrait of joy was so complete it almost seemed rehearsed, like actors performing a holiday play. I lifted my glass half-heartedly, though I had barely sipped from it. My throat was tight, my ears still straining for that sound reel or imagine that had pierced the night just moments ago. Perhaps it was the storm alone, or perhaps it was something else, something we had all failed to notice. The fire's warmth should have comforted me, yet it pressed heavy, suffocating, as though daring me to ignore what gnawed at my conscience. For a moment, my gaze wandered around the room, cataloging the details that everyone else seemed too drunk or distracted to see. My father's booming laugh, too loud, covering over discomfort. My mother's perfectly set table, polished and symmetrical, a shrine to appearances. My cousin's greedy hands tearing into gifts, ribbons flying, the floor littered with paper, like the aftermath of battle. And always, the chair empty, waiting, accusing. Grandma would never miss the first toast, never miss the stories she told us about Christmases past, never miss the prayer she whispered in that fragile, trembling voice, hands folded, eyes closed with reverence that made the room still for a heartbeat. And yet, there she wasn't. I leaned closer to my sister, whispering, "Have you seen Grandma?" She frowned, barely looking up from her phone where she scrolled through photos of the feast, readying her next post. "She's probably resting." "Don't worry." Resting? On Christmas night? During the one moment she lived for all year long. The answer didn't sit right, but my sister's shrug and quick return to her glowing screen told me she didn't care enough to dwell on it. No one did. I forced myself to take a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and bitter on my tongue. Outside, the storm lashed harder, the wind screaming with a kind of desperation that echoed through my chest. My mother glided by, setting down another tray of desserts, her diamond earrings catching the firelight. She smiled at me, tight, perfect, brittle. "Eat something, darling. You're pale." I nodded, but my appetite was gone. I was too aware of the contrast, the decadence spread before us and the hollow space left behind by the one person who should have been at the center of it all. I imagined her upstairs, maybe asleep, maybe forgotten. But even that didn't soothe me. Something was wrong. I could feel it like a tremor beneath the polished surface of the evening. The laughter grew louder, drowning out the storm, drowning out my doubts. But I could not ignore the way my skin prickled, the way the air felt, charged with unspoken guilt. I thought of Grandma's hands, always busy, always working, stitching scarves and baking pies, hands that had shaped our family's traditions more than anyone else's. Those same hands were missing now, absent from the clinking of glasses, absent from the passing of plates, absent from the warmth of the room. And yet, no one asked. No one noticed. I sat back, clutching my glass, and forced a smile when my cousin cracked another joke. But my gaze slid once more toward the windows, to the swirling snow outside, to the emptiness of the chair beside the fire. Something in me whispered that this was not a night of perfect celebration. It was the beginning of a reckoning. I rose from the sofa with a suddenness that startled even me, my champagne glass rattling against the saucer as I set it down too quickly. No one paid attention. The fire crackled, carols swelled, and laughter spilled across the room like a tide that refused to ebb. Yet my heart thudded with an urgency I couldn't ignore. I murmured something about needing air, though I doubt anyone heard me, and slipped out of the living room as quietly as I could. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint glow of garland-wrapped banisters. Every step away from the laughter seemed to sharpen the storm's voice outside, as though the house itself was trying to warn me. I paused at the back door, my hand resting on the brass knob, and listened. The wind howled, pressing against the house like an angry beast. For a long breath, I stood there, torn between the warmth I was leaving behind and the cold dread pulling me forward. Then, steeling myself, I opened the door. The gust hit me like a slap, icy air tearing into my skin. My breath puffed in clouds, snatched away instantly by the gale. Snow swirled in frantic flurries, stinging my cheeks and forcing me to squint. My thin sweater did little to protect me, but the discomfort only sharpened my focus. The world outside was white chaos, but amidst the snow and shadows, something caught my identity first. I thought it was just a trick of the storm, a heap of snow, a fallen branch. But then it moved, shuddering, frail. My chest constricted. No, it couldn't be. Grandma? My voice broke as I stumbled forward, boots sinking into the thickening snow. She sat hunched on the porch steps, her frame so small, so fragile, that for a moment she seemed part of the storm itself, like some forsaken statue half buried in ice. Her nightgown clung to her thin body, damp with snowflakes melting on contact. The soft cotton, once pale blue, looked ghostly under the moonlight. Her bare feet pressed against the wood, white with cold. Her shoulders quaked violently, each tremor seeming to sap what little strength she had left. Grandma. I dropped to my knees beside her, my heart hammering. Her lips were bluish, trembling, as she struggled to form words. Her eyes, wide and wet, met mine with a flicker of recognition. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting, overpowered by the horror of seeing her like this. Too cold, she whispered, barely audible above the storm's howl. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her against me, desperate to share any warmth I could. Her skin felt like ice, rigid and unyielding, as though life itself was slipping from her. I stripped off my coat and draped it over her shaking shoulders, then tucked the edges around her as tightly as I could. My teeth chattered, not only from the cold, but from the terror gripping me. Why are you out here? I asked, though the question was more to the storm than to her. She shook her head weakly, her eyelids fluttering as if sleep threatened to claim her. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let her fade. Behind me, the house glowed warmly, its windows beacons of indulgence and comfort. Music still filtered through, muffled but unmistakable. They were still celebrating, still laughing, oblivious. The image burned me with a sharp, bitter anger. How could they not notice? How could they forget her? I rubbed her arms furiously, whispering, "Stay with me, Grandma. Please, just hold on." Her hand twitched, trying to clutch at mine, and I seized it, squeezing firmly. It was like grasping marble. For a terrible moment, the storm swallowed all sound except the frantic pounding of my heart. I imagined the worst, her slipping away right there, while just inside the family drank to togetherness by the fire. The thought nearly broke me. "No," I said aloud, my voice firm despite the tears threatening my throat. "Not like this." With a surge of determination, I pulled her closer, bracing myself under her slight weight. She was lighter than I remembered, frighteningly so, but every step I took toward the door felt like trudging through molasses, my body straining against the snow and the sheer weight of fear. I gritted my teeth, the warmth of the house only a few feet away, yet feeling like an impossible distance. Finally, I stumbled back across the threshold, slamming the door against the storm's fury. The sudden stillness inside was jarring. The fire's glow painted the room in gold, the music carried on, and my family laughed as if nothing in the world was wrong. But in my arms, Grandma shivered, her breath shallow and uneven, her face pale. As the snow outside no one had noticed we were gone. No one had noticed she was missing at all. Grandma. The word tore from my throat as if naming her might somehow anchor her to life, as if my voice alone could shield her from the cold that had nearly claimed her. I knelt on the rug just inside the doorway, clutching her frail body, my coat barely covering the tremors that racked her. Her lips parted, a whisper of breath escaping. My name formed so softly that I almost believed I had imagined it. Her eyes fluttered like fading candles in the wind, and fury surged through me. How long had she been there? How long had she sat outside, while inside these walls, my family toasted champagne and basked in the glow of a fire meant for all of us? I glanced toward the living room. Their laughter hadn't faltered. The carols still rose, sweet and oblivious, filling the air with a mockery of joy. It was as though two worlds coexisted within the same house, one of gilded comfort and one of silent suffering, and only I had stumbled into the terrible seam between them. The ache in my chest was sharp, bitter, unforgiving. I pulled Grandma closer, feeling her bones press against me through the thin cotton of her nightgown. "It's okay. I've got you," I murmured, though the words felt feeble against the enormity of what had happened. My mind churned with questions, but they all funneled back to a single unbearable truth: she had been forgotten. Anger tightened my throat. I thought of the champagne flutes raised high, the careless toast to family, the selfish comfort that made everyone blind to the empty chair in the corner. The image seared me with shame. Had I not noticed? Had I not listened to that faint instinct tugging at me? Would she have died out there? Would we have found her stiff and silent come morning, a tragedy too late to undo? I pulled the knitted red blanket, her blanket, the one that had waited in vain on her chair, and wrapped it tightly around her shoulders. Her shivers slowed, though her skin remained frighteningly cold. Her breath fogged the air, weak and uneven, but still present. Each shallow inhale was a fragile miracle, one I dared not take for granted. The warmth of the room should have embraced us both, but instead it felt suffocating. The fire hissed, and the laughter beyond the doorway seemed grotesque. I wanted to scream, to march into that room and drag each of them to their feet, force them to look at what they had ignored. But I stayed where I was, because she needed me steady. Her hand, stiff and trembling, fumbled at mine until our fingers interlaced. I squeezed gently, terrified that the faint pressure I felt was the last she could give. "I'm here," I told her, my voice low, though it trembled. "I won't let go." Images flickered in my mind: Grandma in the kitchen baking pies, her laugh ringing when we sneaked tastes of the filling, her humming as she knit scarves, each stitch a small act of devotion, her wrinkled hands guiding mine as she taught me how to fold paper stars for the Christmas tree. She had been the axis of this family, the quiet force that held our fractured parts together. And yet, tonight, they had cast her aside like an afterthought. The injustice of it burned in my veins. A sound escaped me, half sob, half growl. I pressed my forehead against hers, willing my warmth into her chilled skin. "You don't deserve this," I whispered. "Not you. Never you." The storm outside pounded against the windows, but inside, another storm brewed within me. Rage at their negligence, sorrow for her suffering, guilt for not realizing sooner. It churned into a vow. I would not let this moment fade into silence. I would not allow her near death to be brushed aside like a spilled drink on the carpet. For the first time, the laughter from the living room faltered. Perhaps the slam of the door, or the rush of cold air, or maybe some sliver of conscience finally broke through. Footsteps approached, hesitant. And then my mother's voice, bright but tinged with unease. "What on earth?" I turned my head sharply, my glare cutting through the shadows of the hall. Words perched on my tongue, ready to slice, but I bit them back. Not yet. For now, all that mattered was keeping the fragile weight in my arms alive. Still, I wanted them to see. I wanted them to witness the cost of their blindness. I adjusted the blanket around Grandma and leaned close to her ear. "You're safe now," I said, though a part of me wondered if the house itself was safety anymore. Maybe safety had to come from within me, from the fire I carried that would not let her slip away. Her chest rose again, shallow but steady. Relief surged through me, mingled with dread. She was alive for now, but the betrayal lingered, sharp as glass. The family I thought I knew had failed her, and as I held her trembling body, I knew that nothing about this Christmas would ever be the same. The slam of the door cut through the carols like a gunshot. The music faltered, laughter snapped short, and every face turned toward me. I stood in the threshold of the living room, snow still clinging to my hair and boots, my chest heaving from the effort of carrying Grandma inside. Her body sagged in my arms, wrapped clumsily in my coat, and her red blanket, trembling still. The fire glowed behind them all, a mocking backdrop of warmth and indifference, and I felt my rage ignite in its light. "She was outside," I said, my voice sharp and ragged. "At first, No one moved. The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and unbelievable, as if I had spoken in another language. Then a glass slipped from my mother's hand, shattering against the hardwood, champagne seeping into the cracks like spilled guilt. "What do you mean outside?" she stammered, stepping forward, her eyes darting between me and the fragile figure in my arms. "Exactly what I said," I snapped. "Outside, freezing, in her nightgown." Gasps rippled across the room. My father, red-faced and stiff with shock, rose from his armchair and blustered. "How could that? We didn't. I thought she was resting." His words stumbled over one another, flimsy excuses dressed up as explanations. "She wasn't resting," I cut in, louder this time, my anger fueling my strength. "She was dying." The room seemed to shrink around us. My cousins exchanged uneasy glances, shifting in their seats as though guilt itself weighed them down. My aunt pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wide, but said nothing. Not one of them moved to help. Not one of them had thought to ask where Grandma was. Not until now, when the evidence of their negligence lay shivering in my arms. I knelt carefully on the rug, lowering Grandma onto the sofa closest to the fire. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, and I tucked it back firmly, shielding her frail body as best I could. She stirred faintly, a soft groan escaping her lips. I smoothed her damp hair back from her face and whispered, "You're safe now." Whether I believed it or not didn't matter. She needed to hear it. Only then did I look up again. Their eyes were on me, wide and guilty, but none dared meet my gaze for long. My mother wrung her hands, her perfect manicure glinting in the firelight. "We didn't know," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You didn't care to know," I said, the bitterness in my voice sharper than I had ever allowed before. "Her chair was empty all night. You toasted to family without her. You laughed while she froze." My father bristled, his pride flaring even in the face of shame. "Now, hold on, we never meant intentions don't warm frozen skin," I snapped back, my voice echoing off the walls. Intentions don't stop the shaking in her hands or the way her lips turned blue. "She gave everything to this family, and you left her out in the cold." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. The fire crackled, a cruel reminder of the comfort they had hoarded while she sat abandoned. My cousins shifted uneasily, one of them finally muttering, We just thought she was upstairs." The excuse fell flat, pitiful and hollow. I turned back to Grandma, adjusting the blanket around her once more. Her eyes flickered open, glazed, but searching, and for a moment they found mine. Her lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile, gratitude glimmering through the haze of exhaustion. My throat tightened, and I blinked back the sting in my eyes. "I've got you," I whispered, brushing her hand with my thumb. "You're not alone." Behind me, the family stood in awkward stillness, the champagne flutes in their hands suddenly heavy, their celebrations curdled into shame. The tree lights blinked merrily in the corner, but their glow felt hollow now, exposing more than they illuminated. My mother knelt at last, tears threatening to smear her carefully painted face. "I should have noticed," she whispered. "I should have." Her voice cracked, and she trailed off, the weight of her failure hanging in the silence. I said nothing. There were no words that could undo what had nearly happened, no apology that could erase the image of Grandma shivering on the porch steps. All I could do was hold her hand, keep her close, and make sure she never felt forgotten again. The fire roared, filling the silence, but it no longer seemed comforting. It seemed accusatory, a reminder of everything they had chosen over her. Champagne, laughter, appearances, while she, the heart of our family, sat abandoned in the cold. In that moment, I knew Christmas would never look the same to me again. The room, once bright with noise and laughter, had fallen into a heavy quiet. The champagne flutes sat untouched on the mantel, their golden sparkle dulled, forgotten. The fire hissed and popped, throwing shadows across faces that had grown pale with shame. I sat on the rug beside Grandma, her frail hand enclosed in mine, my thumb brushing gently across her cold skin. Slowly, painfully, her shivers eased. Her chest rose and fell with steadier breaths now, though each one seemed fragile, precious, borrowed. I watched her eyes flutter open, not all the way, but enough for me to catch the faintest gleam of recognition. A tiny smile trembled at the corner of her lips, and in that look, gratitude spoke louder than any words could. We had pulled more blankets from upstairs, piling them around her slight frame until she resembled a small cocoon by the fire. My mother crouched nearby, her hands fidgeting, her expression etched with guilt. She reached out now and then to adjust a fold of fabric, but her movements were tentative, almost afraid, as though touching Grandma would remind her of her failure. My father stood stiffly behind the sofa, his jaw clenched, his glassy eyes fixed on the flames. He hadn't spoken since my outburst, though the weight of unspoken words pressed heavily against the air between us. For me, nothing existed beyond the woman beside me. I fed her warmth with my presence, held her hand like a lifeline, and whispered reassurances that were as much for myself as for her. "You're safe now, Grandma. I'm here. I won't let you go." The others lingered at the edges, restless and subdued. The cousins who had laughed the loudest earlier now stared at their hands or the floor, fidgeting with discarded ribbons and bows. My aunt dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her silence heavier than her tears. The room seemed filled with ghosts, not of the dead, but of the living neglect that had nearly stolen someone we all loved. Finally, my mother broke the silence, her voice quivering. We should have noticed." She clasped her hands together, wringing them as if that could squeeze the guilt from her bones. "I should have noticed." The words fell flat, empty apologies that did nothing to erase the image of Grandma shivering outside while laughter rang within. Still, they stirred something. My father shifted uncomfortably, his deep voice gruff when he spoke. "She means everything to this family. We forgot ourselves tonight, got caught up in nonsense." He gestured vaguely toward the half-open presents, the champagne, the half-eaten feast. His words stumbled, halting, but they landed with a weight none of us could ignore. I looked down at Grandma again. Her eyes were closed now, but her breathing was stronger. Her fragile body was fighting, clinging to life, and I marveled at her strength. How had we all overlooked it? She had spent decades giving quietly, endlessly, without expectation, baking, knitting, telling stories, making holidays bright not through gifts or glitter but through her steady love. And when it came time for us to give back, we had failed, but not tonight. Not anymore. I tightened my grip on her hand, then turned to face the room. "This," I said, my voice low but steady, "this is what Christmas is supposed to mean. Not champagne, not parties or presents. It's about being here for each other, about making sure no one is left out in the cold. If we can't even do that for her, for the woman who gave us everything, then what's the point of all of this?" Silence followed, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one carried weight, reflection. My words sank into the firelight, into their eyes, into their shame. For once, they listened. We spent the rest of the evening gathered around Grandma. The television silent, the music turned off. No one spoke much. Words felt too small for what hung between us. Instead, we let the quiet sit, broken only by the fire's hiss and the occasional soft rustle of blankets as someone tucked them more securely around her. Slowly, I watched my family shift, not in grand gestures, but in small, careful acts. My cousin fetched another pillow. My aunt brewed tea, though it mostly sat untouched. My father laid another log on the fire, his hands trembling as he adjusted it just so. Even my mother, whose diamonds had seemed to glitter so coldly earlier, brushed a strand of hair from Grandma's forehead with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. By midnight, the storm outside had softened, its howls quieting to a steady hush of falling snow. The windows glowed with frost, and for the first time that night, the house seemed still. I sat where I had from the beginning, holding Grandma's hand, my body weary but unwilling to move. Her breathing was steadier now, and when her eyes flickered open one last time before she drifted into sleep, they found mine again. This time, her smile held strength. In that smile, I found everything I had been searching for: forgiveness, love, and the reminder of what mattered. Christmas was no longer about perfection or performance. It wasn't about glittering lights or full tables. It was about not letting someone be forgotten, about standing guard when no one else would, about love fierce enough to fight back the cold. As the clock struck midnight, I realized that Christmas had changed forever. And maybe, just maybe, so had we.